we'll consider section 2, the motivation and the process of the fall. First, in order to understand how this problem arose, we need to understand the mission of angels and their relationship to the universe, to God, and to human beings. Angels were created by God prior to any other creation. God created them to be his servants, as an angel calls himself a servant in Revelation, and ministering spirits, as they're called in Hebrews, who would assist God in creating and sustaining the universe. God himself is beyond time and space. In order to develop and prepare the creation as an environment for his children, God needed a substantial object, conscious, spiritually aware, that could relate with him, through whom he could work and develop in the creation. This is the mission of angels. That's why throughout the Bible, angels are agents of God, acting on his behalf, and also responding to him, praising him, and glorifying God. But in Hebrews, Paul says that they also are ministering spirits to attend who? The heirs of salvation. That's us, to serve man. And so all throughout the Bible, we see angels bringing messages to human beings, to the central figures of God's providence. We see an angel unlocking Peter from prison. Because God created human beings as his children and gave us dominion over all creation, we are meant to rule over the angels as well. That's why Paul wrote in Corinthians, "Do you not know that we are to judge the angels?" So, as children of God, we are meant to rule over all of the creation, all of the environment. That includes both physical and spiritual worlds. Jesus said, "The servant does not remain in the house forever, but the son remains forever." Meaning that a servant is in the household based on the good works that he does. But a son, as an heir, has an inheritance and a right that's even deeper and higher. This is the relationship between human beings and angelic beings. From there, we can now consider the spiritual fall and the physical fall. God created human beings with two components, the spirit self and the physical self. Likewise, we live then in two dimensions of reality. And the human fall likewise took place in these two dimensions, the spiritual dimension and the physical dimension. The relationship that took place between Eve and the archangel, the fall that took place through the sexual relationship between the angel and Eve, was the spiritual fall, while the fall that occurred through the relationship between Eve and Adam was the physical dimension of the fall. Let's look at each of these two one by one. First of all, the spiritual fall. After the creation of human beings, Lucifer, feeling as though he were receiving less love than he deserved, wanted to grasp the same central position in human society as he enjoyed in the angelic world as the channel of God's love. This was why he seduced Eve, and this was the motivation of the spiritual fall. Let's consider Lucifer's motivation. Now, prior to the existence of human beings, as an archangel, Lucifer was closest to the love of God, and it was through him that God's love was channeled to the whole of the angelic world. He was closest until when? Until the creation of Adam and Eve. At that point, God did not love Lucifer less, but human beings with a deeper capacity of love, with ownership over creation, with self-awareness and a deeper sense of moral capacity, could experience a dimension of love from God and relationship with the universe that the angel couldn't touch. So Lucifer sensed, comparatively, a lessening of love. Not because God was loving him less, but because God's children were now present. It's similar to the feeling of an older sibling who sees a brand new, younger baby brother or sister brought home. Parents aren't loving their older child less, but at that time, the baby needs more attention. And so the elder can feel comparatively less love. Now, this is the motivation that led the angel to seek to access that love by coming closer to Adam and Eve, and naturally being attracted to Eve, who was beautiful in the love of God. But when Lucifer's motivation, when his desire for love became so strong that he determined to dominate that love, even if it meant destroying God's plan or undermining Adam and Eve's purpose. From that moment, he became an enemy. In other words, when his love changed from a God-centered love for the sake of others to a self-centered love, he became an enemy. The Hebrew word for enemy is Satan. Lucifer became an enemy when he became the first being in creation who said, "Me first." Now let's consider the motivation of Eve. Lucifer, who left his proper position due to his excessive desire, and Eve, who wanted to open her eyes and become like God before the time ripe, formed a common base. The power of the unprincipled love generated by their give and take led them to consummate an illicit sexual relationship on the spiritual plane, on a spiritual level. Now consider first Eve's motivation, and then we'll consider the possibility of such a relationship. As long as Eve related to God, her father, she was learning the heart of a true daughter. With her brother Adam, she learned the heart of a sister. Eventually, she would learn the heart of a wife and mother, experiencing these dimensions of womanhood in a pure and natural setting. But suddenly, a self-centered love was focused upon her, and in her immaturity, she couldn't sense or compare God's love, which she had a limited capacity to understand, with the attention being poured on her by the angelic being in her presence. As Eve began to have give and take with this love, she became emotionally drawn, emotionally connected, ultimately confused and unclear. And so the power of that unprincipled love overcame her understanding of the commandment and of God's will. And she engaged in an illicit and false sexual relationship. Now, we also might ask, how could such a relationship be possible between an angelic being and a human being? In fact, the Bible describes concrete contact between angels and human beings several times. For example, an angel wrestles with Jacob, strikes the hollow of his thigh and knocks it out of joint. Similarly, angels come to Lot. Angels come to Abraham, eat food, take meals, and at times are unrecognized. In fact, Hebrews 13:1, Paul says, "Be careful to entertain strangers, for in this way some have, without knowing, been entertaining angels." So their appearance and relationship and connection with human beings in a substantial way is biblically supported and apparently possible. So now let's consider the physical fall. The second aspect. Eve then seduced Adam with the hope that by uniting with him, she could rid herself of the dread and once again stand before God. In the heat of passion, in the power of her emotion, Eve became confused. She justified her action and got lost in the emotions. But when passion cooled, Eve felt empty. She'd been used, not loved. She understood that she was not meant to relate with the angel, and she was desperate to regain her lost innocence. She should have turned to God, but that was too painful. She instead turned to Adam. She was filled also with fear, guilt, and shame. These were the feelings that arose first in the angel when he knowingly and willingly contradicted God's will. Any human being will have the same experience when we act against what we know is right. Fear, guilt, and shame will arise. Eve inherited these feelings and sensibilities through her relationship, intimate relationship with the angel when they exchanged spiritual elements through their sexual give and take. Now she desired to rid herself of that dread. This was Eve's motivation, which led to the physical fall. As she came to Adam and sought to regain that relationship, tragically, she'd learned through her false relationship with the angel a false femininity. And now, Adam was drawn and ultimately seduced by that desire. Adam responded, formed a common base with Eve, who was now standing in the position of the archangel. They began give and take action with each other which brought them together in an illicit physical relationship of sexual love. Not that sex itself is a problem. It's intended by God. It's the holiest and most beautiful of acts that bring a man and woman into oneness centered on God. But here, self-centered and premature, it was a misuse of God's ideal of love. Let's now consider the power of love, the power of the principle, and God's commandment.